So while waiting for Congress to act can be frustrating, but none of you know what I'm talking about there, right? Our next set of panelists know that there is more for us to do right now than just wait. Instead of sitting idly by, they are a set of environmental, labor, local, and state leaders who are already working on one of the most common sense things we can do to reduce America's energy use, and that's improving the energy efficiency of our homes and office buildings. Here to introduce them and their efforts is Roger Platt, Senior VP of Global Policy and Law at the U.S. Green Building Council. In this position, Roger is responsible for overseeing the policy aspects of the increasing global adoption of green building and urban development practices. Before joining USGBC, Roger worked as a senior vice president and counsel with the Real Estate Roundtable and as a consultant to President Clinton and his then newly formed Corporation for National and Community Service. Please join me in welcoming Roger and our next panel.
Thank you so much. We have a wonderful panel for you now on a topic that, while it was referred to as common sense, also has a lot of wisdom and, I think, visionary elements to it. This is a conference, obviously, that's about green jobs. And I was reminded of the importance of that this morning when my daughter was talking to me, who's just graduated from college, summa cum laude, and she is watch while I market her over the rest of this event. And she plunked in Google the words, she's looking for a job. So she wants a good job and she wants green jobs. And it pops up and she goes, "Dad, did you know you're about to introduce some people this morning at a conference?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." And the people that I'm gonna introduce, she's amazed that I can brush my teeth, let alone get to a conference and do anything. So I basically said, I'm going to be introducing a teacher that's helping people get green jobs. I'm going to be introducing an advocate and a lawyer that's trying to make New York and the rest of the country a better place for a green economy. I'm going to be introducing a lawmaker from California. I'm going to be introducing a leader, a governor of one of the most progressive states in the country, and I'm going to be introducing a visionary business activist. So what I want to do now is give you I'm going to introduce and then I'm going to have them introduce themselves with a few words, and then we'll get into some question and answers. Forgive the speed with which this is all happening. It's kind of speed dating with very, very prominent guests. But as you know, things need to move quickly here. So I'm going to start by introducing Phil Campbell, who I referred to before as the teacher in our pack of stars, green job stars. Phil is a training specialist for UA. He's won all kinds of accolades within the union and within the training world. He is kind of the teacher, the mentor, a crucial figure on this. And I'm going to let you also just make some initial comments. Thank you, Phil.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be here today, and also bring greetings from our General President, Bill Haidt, who actually was going to be speaking today but couldn't, so he sends his regrets. But he sent his most valuable staff member to be on the panel, so we'll go. And when we talk about energy efficiency, it can really be a very valuable job creator for many of the trades. But I think specifically for the piping trades that the United Association, which I'm a member of the United Association, plumber, pipe fitters, HVACR technicians, and sprinkler fitters. This will include new construction jobs, installing sustainable energy efficient technology in new buildings, such as new HVACR systems, new motors, new pumps, new piping systems. But what will create even more jobs is retrofitting existing buildings that have old technology and are energy wasting technology. We'll be able to save energy and cost-saving technology And then another part of that is afterwards maintaining and servicing those systems. If we don't maintain and service the energy efficient systems that we put in and keep them energy saving, they'll just go back to being the energy wasters that we had to begin with. So this is an ongoing thing. We build green buildings, we have to keep them green. However, what could be probably the most significant part of this, and energy efficiency, is water conservation. I think that's something that a lot of people forget about. If we can save and decrease our water use, that will not only preserve our most precious resource, but we could save very easily up to 50% of the water that we use daily in moving and treating sewage and creating potable water. This will also save 50% of the cost of power that we use in one of the most expensive and the highest use of power in the energy sector. Moving and treating water is one of the most expensive things that we do. To do this and to accomplish this, we need to build new buildings with water-efficient fixtures and plumbing systems, and also, again, retrofit buildings with new fixtures, new water-saving features. And most importantly, we need to replace our antiquated infrastructure, which is leaking daily, and in some cases estimated of losing 50% of the potable water that we spend so much money on, and we spend so much money moving throughout the country. To accomplish this, our workforce needs to be highly trained in the skills needed to implement these new technologies. What we have to do is to green our existing workforce into new methodologies with ongoing training that is flexible and targeted to industry needs so that we can provide training whenever and wherever possible. And additionally, we have to attract new people that will come into the trades, which seems to be more and more difficult as we go along into a trades and an industry that seems to be becoming increasingly less popular. So to end on that sour note.
Well, let's not end on that sour note. Let's emphasize the fact that, first of all, I'm surprised when he was referencing the various unions, we didn't get a little more shout-outs, a little more positive there. But he is involved in water, and water is absolutely the next crisis-oriented resource for the whole globe. It's what the future wars will be fought over. And so people that get involved in this and get involved in the kind of work that he's talking about are going to feel very smart in a few years. So anyway, I just want to emphasize that and not be so grim about it.
Thank you.
Like combining it with some grim information about the future, but still job-related opportunities. Kit Kennedy is the lawyer, the advocate that I identified before. She's with the Natural Resources Defense Council. This is the thinking person's environmental group, one that gets a tremendous amount done, but also is not afraid of placing a lot of both political power, but a lot of brain power also behind what they do. She has worked there for 25 years, which is a tribute to the organization because a lot of people would like to have Kit Kennedy advocating for them. She worked for Andrew Cuomo for a couple of years as his top environmental lawyer in New York State, and now back again with NRDC, and has a tremendous amount of insight into what the state of New York has done, can do, to create a greener economy. And I'm going to ask her to say a few words now. Kit Kennedy.
Great. Thank you, Roger, and thanks to Dave Foster and everyone at the Blue Green Alliance for putting together this great conference, and to all of you for waking up early and joining us to give us your ideas and your energy. As Roger mentioned, I'm with NRDC. We like to think of ourselves as the fighting person's environmental organization because we're out there trying to change things, trying to fight climate change and build the clean energy future. And I'll keep this brief. We all know, and we've long known, that energy efficiency is the fastest, cheapest, cleanest solution to America's energy and pollution woes. And we also know it's the solution that's going to create the most skilled jobs for all of you, for America's plumbers, for our electricians, for all the many trades who are working on construction, building, and manufacturing. And yet, we've really only scratched the surface of the energy efficiency potential here in the United States. Existing buildings in our country use 40% of our energy. We pay $400 billion in energy payments to meet these energy needs, yet much of this energy is wasted, and there's so much we can do to fix that, as Phil was explaining. Luckily, we're beginning to make progress. We have states like Vermont and leaders like Governor Shumlin. We have California, which is really in the lead on these issues, and Senator Pavley's been a huge part of that. And we have individuals like Tom Steyer who are stepping forward and making energy efficiency really a key part of our energy strategy. But we have to do more. We have to have every state in the union require investments in all cost-effective energy efficiency so that we're getting at that existing building stock, those older buildings, we're making those retrofits and those energy efficiency improvements. And we have to have policies that are going to make that happen at our public utility commissions, and we have to have states leading by example and showing how energy efficiency can be done through making government buildings really leaders in energy efficiency. And the federal government, of course, has to do more to support the states, to fund these efforts, and to require minimum energy efficiency levels for lightings, for refrigerators, for all the products that we use in our homes and businesses so that we can do more with less energy. At NRDC, we're really stepping up our efforts on energy efficiency. We have about 100 people focused on energy efficiency and clean energy all across the country. We're making energy efficiency the cornerstone of our new plan to curb carbon pollution from power plants, using Clean Air Act authority so that we can use energy efficiency to bring down carbon levels, to make our power plants more efficient, and to give states flexibility while they're doing better. We also have an exciting new initiative working with cities across the United States. And together with the Institute for Market Transformation and other stakeholders, we're going to be partnering with 10 cities across the United States, sharing our expertise and know-how on energy efficiency, and putting in place, working with these cities to put in place energy efficiency retrofit policies that will make those cities leaders and really bring change from cities on upward to states, to our whole country, and we hope to the world. So there's a lot to be done. Everyone on this panel is doing a huge amount, and we're really excited to be here today and to get your energy and ideas in the audience as well.
Thank you so much. Kid highlighted a factoid that you don't want to forget, which is this $400 billion worth of energy costs and a huge amount of waste that's associated with that, and money that could be going into much more productive investments than just the wasted energy. But a 10-city partnership that NRDC is doing, many, many other things they're doing, stay tuned because they're bringing some of what also has been vital public policy in New York City to other cities, and it's very, very, very exciting. Just a quick rejoinder, because she had told me that her LEED certified office, USGBC does the LEED certification, is sometimes irritating because when she sits in her office and thinks, the light goes out. And I think that's probably why I said it was the thinking person's environmental group. I fully understand that when you're fighting, the lights go back on. So but you have to fight to get the lights to go back on. So anyway, so that was my thinking on that. Next is our lawmaker, Fran Pavley. Now, Fran has the power resume because while others had slightly longer resumes, her basically said she is the author of California's absolutely globally known legislation committing California to address climate change.
Thank you.
Now, I am astonished that while she is working with the 8th largest economy in the world's global footprint or whatever, she is also doing a lot for her own constituents, and she told me she's doing some really interesting work both with the military, R&D in her district, and also with other ways that she's sort of piloting things that will result in more jobs for her constituents. So she is on the job both as a real advocate for her community, but she's also doing something that's spectacularly important globally. So with that, please give us a little bit more insight into what you're up to.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure for me to be here, and thank you, Blue Green Alliance, for inviting me to participate. This coalition up here is amazing because this is exactly how we pass public policy in California. We have the support of labor, premier environmental groups like NRDC. We have the support lots of times and work collaboratively with other states and sometimes other countries. And it wouldn't get done without the support and help for people like Tom Steyer and progressive businessmen who understand that it's not a choice between the environment and the economy and are pushing the agenda and making us successful. California, just so you know a little bit about us, 38 million people, more people than all of Canada, I like to remind people. And a state senator in California represents 931,000 people. That's more than a member of Congress. And so I have to remind myself of the role that California plays in all this. And because we are so big, when we pass little standards like, let's say, more energy efficient appliances like a refrigerator, pretty soon it becomes a de facto national standard. We're working collaboratively with the Energy Commission to make sure appliances and building standards and everything are enforced, and so that people that have legitimate licenses and training get those jobs, and you're not undercut by people that don't have that training. That's an important piece of this sort of puzzle that we're working on. I wanted to speak a little bit about one of the successes under AB 32 that was sort of the cornerstone of all this. It was about 10 years ago, a decade ago, that California passed our clean car law. And it's sort of indicative of how a policy in California can become a national standard. And what this bill did was sort of test the concept of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the tailpipes of automobiles to make them more energy efficient. I thought that was relatively easy. I was a freshman legislator coming in. I didn't realize you would be taking on all the oil companies and other special interest. But we were able to prevail. Frankly, multiple lawsuits. I had to apologize to the government of Vermont because they adopted our legislation very quickly and got sued also on that. We had the wonderful support also of labor, and NRDC was right there with us, and a group of businessmen called environmental entrepreneurs, sort of clean tech leaders in California. So this standard got passed. It went up to the Supreme Court. Waiver was denied from the EPA. California, in order to pass more stringent air pollution standards, has to get a waiver under the Federal Clean Air Act. We eventually did with the Obama administration. And thanks to the Blue Green Alliance and United Auto Workers, we were able to take that. It became a national policy, but with their support, it also worked with the Department of Transportation, upping our fuel efficiency standards to 54 miles per gallon. That is the future. That deserves a round of applause. It's now a national policy, and Canada's adopted it too. And what's interesting about pushing this agenda, it's a win-win-win. I think there was 3 or 4 wins in all this. Of course, cleaning up the air and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It creates new jobs, and I think it helped to revitalize the American automobile market, creating a market for this broader consumer choice of vehicles, cleaner, more fuel-efficient vehicles, very popular right now, especially with $4 a gallon gasoline. It's reduced dependence on foreign oil and how much money we're sending to other countries that don't particularly have the best interests of the United States in mind. And this has been a very exciting piece of AB 32, but again, just a story of California and how we work collaboratively together with a variety of interests to pass these laws and protect good jobs in the future. So thank you very much for letting me tell a little bit of the story of California.
Thank you very much. I had introduced her as the person who had authored the climate change law in California, and it's very unusual for people to have 2 spectacular acts in their career, and her career is still rolling along. But the second piece is this legislation in California that became the inspiration for what we've done nationally for energy efficiency in cars. And when the president was moving forward with that great initiative nationally, he had a special ceremony where he honored Fran for her role. So if it's humbling a bit what can be accomplished sometimes with your 900,000 constituents or whatever. Next is our leader. You recall we have our teacher and our advocate and our lawmaker, but we have a leader in the sitting governor of Vermont. And he is also an extraordinarily ambitious individual with progressive ideals that should not be shocking to us, but are increasingly hard to advance with the conservative momentum in our nation. So he is working and announced that Vermont will have a single-payer health insurance program, and he is working very, very diligently here, just in Washington now, to advance that. But has in Vermont, of course, on this issue of energy efficiency, he has in Efficiency Vermont and all kinds of programs in Vermont, also tremendous role models for economic development combined with environmental effectiveness. So with that, Governor, please give us some of your thoughts.
Well, thank you, and thanks so much to this great panel and to the Alliance for putting this together, and to all of you for joining us this morning. I'll try to be brief so that we can spend some time having a conversation. But I'm one of the few elected officials in America that ran for governor in 2010 on a very simple platform that I was going to help create jobs and get some tough things done by embracing the opportunity to grow Vermont's economy by facing climate change head-on, understanding that our window to make change is extraordinarily small, that if we don't scramble to change, get off our addiction to oil, and move to renewables to do energy efficiency right, this planet's going to be unlivable for our kids and grandkids. It seems like a big one to me. And that we have an opportunity to make the Industrial Revolution and the recent tech boom look small by moving in all sectors, not just energy efficiency, but generation, transportation, everything that we do, to reorient the way we do energy as a state. And we're doing it. We have, as was just mentioned, the most aggressive energy efficiency utility. It's a regulated utility in Vermont. We all pay for it through a charge on our electric bill. That's drastically reducing the amount of kilowatts that we burn. We are exporting those jobs to other states because we're getting it right. In fact, I might mention, since we're here in Washington, D.C., it's actually our efficiency that does the energy efficiency here in the district. And we're showing how we can create jobs by doing energy efficiency right. We're harnessing the wind, the sun, our fields and forests through biomass, our cow manure through the great milk that we make to make great ice cream that some of you might have eaten in your careers. And Ben & Jerry's, if you're wondering. and doing everything that we know how to address this challenge. Now, here's the results. We have doubled the number of solar panels in Vermont since I've been governor just over 2 years. We have built wind farms across the state, the first to be erected in our history. We are doing everything we know how to not only win on the electric utility efficiency front, but moving to thermal, because we're a cold state and we leak a lot of that foreign oil from our windows and our doors and our buildings. So we're conquering that one. But most importantly, we're getting the results. Vermont right now, because of our investments and manufacturing of the components to make this transition from oil to other ways of powering the future, happens to have the third lowest unemployment rate in America. That's a big deal. I want to point out that the states that are beating us, 1 and 2, happen to be beating us by extracting things from the ground that we're trying to get off our addiction to. So, you know, had it not been for the oil and gas they're drilling for, we'd be number 1. Second, we have more green, clean, high-tech jobs per capita than any other state in the nation. That's a new result because we're making these investments. And third, and perhaps most importantly, as governors who are trying to create jobs and economic opportunities, but also to raise the incomes of those who have jobs, because we know that the big challenge for America over the last decade has been stagnant incomes. We were actually the only state in America in 2011 to see income growth. It was only 4%, but guess what? It was 4% better than the other 49 states in America. So my message to all of us in this room is simple. If we could change our language about this conversation and this moral imperative to leave this planet very quickly in better shape than the way we found it, and talk about the jobs and economic opportunities that lie out there for those that go first, we would be winning this battle to ensure that the biggest energy hog in the world, the United States of America, becomes the jobs nation, where jobs are growing, incomes are rising, and we have a prosperous future. That's my message as a governor.
Check your watches and calendars. You were here and you heard a great leader. It is wonderful, and it is all too infrequent to find people who you want to have lead you at a time when these issues seem so challenging. The emphasis on the fact that these things are working is a source of some excitement to me, a little bit of frustration in that you can keep showing tremendous success, and some people seem to not be seduced into accepting this very powerful truth. We have, as our next speaker, an individual. I haven't been able to give him the one-word title that I wanted to give everybody else of teacher and leader, because he's had a very eclectic career. He is, in many respects, an example of sort of the American success story of someone who's accomplished a lot in the business world and produced a lot of investment that's created jobs and created impact. But he's also turned his attention full-time to being essentially a kind of citizen activist with a huge understanding of the intersection of industry, business, economics issues, and environment and clean energy. So he is a good person to play backup and give us some of the vision and some of the specific ideas that you think are going to be necessary to create the kind of world that could could have leaders like the governor in this, what I think still feels a little bit like an alternative universe in which there are all these wonderful people working together, but let's try to make it something more real. Tom Steyer.
So thank you very much for having me, and I do think what these guys have said has been very inspirational. What I'm going to talk about is pretty practical at the moment, which is how to get something done in a system when jobs and energy are not necessarily linked in everybody's minds. And what I'm going to talk about is a proposition that we passed in California last November, and I want to try and analogize it to the whole United States, because I think in some ways, both good and bad, California has politically been ahead of the country. We famously went broke before the United States went broke. We famously had almost complete gridlock in our legislature before the United States had almost complete gridlock in their legislature. And the difference in this case is that we have had a series of really amazing leaders, including Fran Pavley, who over a decade have worked on energy policy consistently and, in my opinion, incredibly successfully. So when you're in a system where there is no extra money, which we in California have been in for about a decade, and where it's very hard to pass things, the first thing you need to do for a new proposal or a new idea is to find a revenue source. So for Proposition 39 last year, the new revenue source we found was corporations who were paying less than everybody else in their state income tax. And there was a loophole in the law which enabled out-of-state corporations to pay less than everybody else. And for the reason of gridlock in our legislature, the Democrats kept trying to get that through and they never could close this loophole. So we put a proposition on the ballot basically to say, let's close this loophole. It's worth $1 billion a year to California. And we wanted to use that money for energy efficiency in public schools and state office buildings. So we had a very obvious thing to do, which we described in the language that Peter Shumlin was just using. That basically, if we did this, we would create a lot of jobs. We figured that we created about 20 jobs per $1 million. We would reduce our carbon footprint. We would produce savings, because we tried to describe this as an investment in our schools and office buildings, in the sense that we didn't just spend the money and the money went away. We would spend the money, and as a result, we would save about 30% of our energy savings every year, and that money in the school budget after that could be going to teachers, it could be going to school books, it could basically be going to the education of our children. And we viewed this as the lowest hanging fruit. As Kit Kennedy said, this was the most straightforward thing we could do from an energy standpoint. This was the most straightforward thing we could do from a job standpoint. And we basically had found a way to fund it, which in a society, when governments are out of money, finding a source of new revenue is something that is extremely difficult to do. We also had the advantage, we've actually turned this subsequently specifically to the public schools, where it has the advantage of, our schools, many of them have not been retrofitted for over 30 years. And as a result, the HVAC systems are really old and in need of replacement. And as a result, the air in the classrooms is actually really terrible. And so one of the benefits of this, beyond the money, beyond the carbon footprint, is actually the health of our kids. So that as a result of saying this, we can show that the kids will be healthier, and believe it or not, we can show that their test scores will be higher. So we basically went through this, and I'll just make two more points. One is about coalition, which is, as Fran said, in California, the group of people who worked on this were bipartisan. I co-chaired it with a Republican, George Shultz, who'd been in 3 Republican administrations going back to Dwight Eisenhower. We had very, very strong labor support. Art Pulaski, who's the head of the AFL in California, was absolutely instrumental in supporting us. He basically enabled us, along with 2 other propositions, to knock on 5 million doors. The head of the building trades, Robbie Hunter, was someone else who from the very beginning understood what the implications of this were. His his unions had an incredibly high unemployment rate as a result of the financial bust, and he could see that this was going to be tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 jobs to people who he was not just to he was representing, but to people in California. So that we had a very strong labor representation, but we also got business behind this. And in addition, we reached out to every ethnicity, because one of the points, the big political points for us has been that if you look at the polling, the ethnic group in California that cares the most about the environment is Latinos. The number 2 group is Asian Americans. The number 3 group is African Americans. Our coalition we've done this twice. We have always worked really hard to reach out to everybody across the state and to try and get both business and labor to understand that this was a jobs program and a economic success story, and also to every community to say the face of environmentalism is different from what most people think. I would say, we've done this twice. We got about 62% of the vote. This was something that we were able to push. Well, I mean, the funny thing, I'm not a professional politician. I'm very far from a professional politician. I'm sitting up here with 2 people who are professional politicians. But it seems to me, at least in propositions, the key is to is to push out your opponents very early. And in the things that we're doing, a lot of times our opponents are extremely large, well-financed companies. And what we've tried to do in thinking about this is, how are we going to negate their influence? And a lot of that has to do with what Peter was talking about in terms of language, and a lot of it has to do with strategy. So the one thing that I would say, and I'll stop now, is I believe that the strategies and the techniques that we've used in California can be used across the country. I believe that we can win this politically on a local basis using the same arguments and the same coalitions that we've used in California. And I really hope that together we can go out and prove that that is true going forward.
I think we're almost completely out of time, and which is frustrating, but was what we were told with a rough thing. What I wanted to do was to make sure that we gave the governor another opportunity also, perhaps following up what you've heard from the other speakers, what you heard from Tom, the very encouraging, very, very encouraging signal he's sending that there's real lessons learned from these successes in what is hopefully not just a uniquely Californian direct democracy scenario of these propositions, but where there's real, first strike capability, political savvy that he was reflecting there. Just give us some of your sense about what can the folks in the room do to be helpful, and what are some lessons you're thinking are most important to reinforce at this point?
Well, I think the panel has done a great job of outlining the opportunities. I want to go to something that Tom just closed with, which is, how we organize better. It's messaging, but it's also, and I think this is really important to everybody sitting here, it's recognizing that most big political movements in this country come from the grassroots, and the politicians are usually the last to get there, and this one's no different. So since we know that many of you are way ahead of the people that you elect, think of every single opportunity that we can to not only change the messaging, but get folks mobilized. Now, as an example, in Vermont right now, we have 100, almost 3/4 of our towns have a local volunteer energy committee. We've coordinated them through state government, and they're competing with each other, town by town, village by village, to beat each other in both energy efficiency and renewable deployment. And as an example, I was last Saturday at this little town of Waterbury, which has doubled the number of solar and other renewable installations in the community in the last 12 months, and they're planning to triple it in the next year. The whole community's involved. It was a kind of a fair where everyone showed their products and where the whole town turned out to get involved. So the people are ahead of us on this one in terms of the politicians, and we've got to find ways to mobilize them. And the second thing I would say is this: when we have opportunities that hit us, it's important to not let them evaporate, as we often do in this country. Example, as a governor, I have managed now 3 major climate change-induced storms, one of which, Tropical Storm Irene, hit our little state so hard that we lost 7 Vermonters, that we lost businesses, we lost homes, we lost, just extraordinary infrastructure. Just a few months later, Sandy hits, and you see the governor of New Jersey and the governor of New York struggling to put back together their climate change-induced challenges. And what we've got to do is ensure that we're not only talking about the jobs of the future, but also the current costs of our energy policies that are dragging millions and millions of dollars out of our pockets to rebuild infrastructure because of the way the weather patterns have already changed. And we've really got to teach all of us, I believe, to talk about these challenges for what they are, an early signal of what the planet will be like, not 100 years from now, but 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, if we don't all work together to hold politicians' feet to the fire, to capture the jobs, and to ensure that this is our top priority in the way we lead our lives, use our volunteer time, and vote for politicians. We should stop voting and electing politicians who deny that climate change exists.
Woo-hoo.
Okay, well, no one's coming out and giving me the hook, so I'm gonna soldier forward and give you some more good info here. Fran, you can add either some additional words of wisdom or some practical insights for these groups that you've learned from the success you've had building these coalitions, making things happen. I do want to end on some of that positive note of what can be accomplished. Fran.
Very good. I'd love to tell success stories.
Please.
So that's very good. And I'll share with you one. California, by putting a cap on emissions and requiring rollback to 1990 levels, has created an unbelievable market for opportunity. And AB 32 passed back in 2006, and we've seen an amazing amount of investment in new clean technologies, in renewable energy, alternative fuels. And you're exactly right. We talked about water as the next energy efficiency measure, critically important in California. This is sort of an area that requires a lot of our attention. 20% of all the energy we use in California is moving, treating, and heating water. So, Mr. Steyer, your next proposition, perhaps something in the water arena would be good. But we actually have also under AB 32, under cap and trade, is possibility of using auction revenues to really increase and enhance jobs, not only in water efficiency and water conservation, but in a variety of other ways. But my one success story I wanted to share with you is regarding our renewable portfolio standard. In California, 33% of all our energy has to come from clean renewable sources. We have applause for that. And here's the amazing thing about this story. So over the years, we gradually increased it, 10%, 20%, 33%. It was this sort of false, non-partisan issue, Democrats voting yes, Republicans voting no. On our 33% vote, 4 Republican state senators stood up on the floor supporting a move to 33%. Why? Because over the last several years, there are businesses in their districts, jobs being created in their districts. These new business owners and people working at these jobs are members of their chambers of commerce. This became a nonpartisan issue because it was a jobs issue, and it really was an amazing win-win moment. I sat there on the floor and I realized we can create these successes, and that's how we put people together. So that's my ending story.
Thank you, Fran. And finally, we thank you. we are getting the hook now. The Congresswoman is standing by, and so thank you. You've been a great audience, and this has been a wonderful, inspiring panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.